Welcome to Dear Grandchildren, a Tracker's Tale. I'm Michael Douglas, your guide on this journey into the heart of nature and the wisdom that it holds. Here, we blend the ancient skills of survival, tracking, and foraging with modern insights to help you reconnect to the wild within. In each episode, we'll explore timeless practices, share life-changing stories, and discover how the natural world can bring you mindfulness, resilience, and purpose. But this podcast is more than just a show. It's a community. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcast, where you'll find exclusive content, question and answer sessions, bonus tales. For those seeking a deeper connection, explore our workshops and experiences, or even bring me to your community for an unforgettable adventure. Now, let's step off the trail and into a possible nature experience that could change how you see the world. Let's begin. This is going to be one of those episodes that you'll want to revisit with a notebook. And I say that in all sincerity because it is a layered life study that's going to be delivered to you in, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes. But it's so critical. In fact, it is the elements of your survival. What keeps you alive? What systems need to be addressed? Strip away all the superfluous. McDonald's drive-thru is not on the list. Neither is the, one day only sale or the screens. And we forget. We get too distracted by the bright and shinies. Folks who could be incredible craftsmen spend 3.5 years in the bright and shiny distraction of handmade knives. So many calories, so much resources diverted from getting your foundation together. Now, we were supposed to do this as kids. We've all built shelters, pretended to be animals, played hide and seek or predator-prey games. Tag is another one. We've all tried to sneak up on things and climb, and all of these things were genetically predisposed in order that we hone our skills at that early of an age to provide these 5 critical elements. And I hate the word survival because it's been turned into something foolish. I'm not going to let people turn the word primitive into the same thing as something less than, when it's actually the means by which you maintain your personal sovereignty. The means by which you stay at peace and confident in who you are, because nobody can foreclose on your home if you can build one wherever you go. The power could go off, but you know what to do. And it's not inconvenience, it's bring it on. It's, I can do this. It's funny how language seems to get wrested from the people who need it the most and controlled by elements that want to maintain some sort of power over. The Asclepian promise of do no harm has been adulterated by the almost exclusive trade linguistics of the medical community. Thankfully, the internet has equaled things out a little bit, and we can do our own research. So the struggle between who is going to pattern our brains has, for millennia, been a thing. These tools, both the physical, the sacred order of survival, and the internal landscape management tools that deal with proactive mindset, increasing your awareness, being more discerning with choices, and tracking the primary, secondary, and tertiary disturbance rings that emanate from those choices for more informed changes of direction or increases and decreases in passion or intention. There's so many things. A hunter knows how to do this. Hunters who think that they're going to get a deer never see one. And so they learn to temper their intention so that the deer come in closer with less alarm. It might be just bring a book so that you're reading a book and distracting your mind. But these tools are ancient. They're no longer taught. And so education has become institutionalization more than enlightenment. These are your inherent gifts. I'm just taking the dust off of them and saying, hey, there's this. Maybe you want to use this. Do you think this will help? Well, these gifts are what kept us alive off grid for thousands and thousands of years, and the most successful, if you're judging by time, expression of our species within these landscapes. We're going to go into 5 life-sustaining systems that need to be in place so that you can operate from a place of comfort, creativity, joy, and productivity. Anything less than that is an injured animal. And if you don't believe me, you've never seen fox or otter playing, or raccoons. When they have enough calories, they can be at ease. They can sun themselves like a lion on the Serengeti. It's when they're suffering through dis-ease that they start to get nasty. They start to withdraw from. They become violent or apathetic. Antisocial. Sound familiar? So, to get our systems back online, we have to start for the core operating systems. Attitude, born of choice and awareness. We're going to circle back and get more in detail with each one of these. Shelter, from the clothes on your back to the most modern of McMansions. Water, whether it comes from the sky or you exude it from your body, it's all connected. Stuff that runs under the ground could have been the tears of your grandparents' grandparents. Could have been the blood coursing through the veins of a T-Rex or the moisture in elephant dung. It's all connected. We got to figure out how to collect water that when we drink it isn't going to force us to have the Hershey squirt so violently that we actually die of dehydration or hypovolemic shock, because that is a risk now. Fire. Fire in the ancient manner to shape tools, to cook food. There wasn't any boiling of water back then until we became dependent on farming, and then there was all kinds of manner of disease in water. In fact, beer was a medicinal expression because water was so bad in the village. But we need to have fire in our modern world now for keeping time, distracting us with the new Mandela of division and doubt. I mean, the news cycles. I mean, television. I mean, that entertainment thing on your wall that some people are shackled to for payments. Anyway, shelter, water, fire, and then there's the never-ending quest for calories. Remember COVID? It was the never-ending quest for ass wipes, but because, priorities. That says a lot, doesn't it? That says a lot about the global consciousness and maturity level of a species. But if you look at cats and dogs, they spend a lot of time visiting their anal glands, so maybe there's something to it. That idea that we have to kill every day in order to survive, to maintain enough calories, has been so desensitized in us that we can watch social media and without any emotional investment view a person getting beaten to death, or a crocodile taking someone's pet off the coast of some golf course in Florida. There's so many things that have desensitized us that we're in real trouble if we have to get our own food. Because without having some sort of emotional buy-in into the process, you're not going to see the deer. You're not going to catch the rabbit. You have to have enough of an understanding of their behaviors, enough stake in the game, that there should be an emotional exchange there. You have to kill every day in order to live. But because, again, of our domesticated expression, Homo sapien domestico fragilis is barely able to park at the distant end of the lot to get to the food store and back without having been winded. Can you imagine running 20 miles in the desert to spear a deer? Every day. Right. Nature has a way of self-regulating, and we've managed to avoid it for about 500 years. And our ancestors had larger craniums and more vigor. The strength and the endurance of a hunter-gatherer nomad compared to a chairborne ranger is night and day. Look at Biffy the Wonder Dog. Compare Biffy to the wolf who has to hunt every day. Look at their eyes. One looks through your soul. The other one, every time they blink, they think it's a new day. The cow and the deer. Domestication has a cost, and convenience kills in excess. Anything does. In herbalism, and we say this in our foraging classes, the difference between a food, a medicine, and a poison is dosage and frequency of use. And I believe we've overdosed on Netflix and enriched white flour to the point where when we go outside and eat a dandelion, it doesn't taste good anymore. The bitters create a negative reaction, but you can train your palate to like the bitters. So as I go through this list, you might think, I don't know, that's a lot to ask. Isn't that kind of unrealistic? I mean, why don't you join the real world? The real world isn't wrapped in polystyrene trays. The real world isn't wrapped in a box with wheels that takes you to a box with an elevator, which brings you back to the box with the bed in it. The real world lives and breathes through the seasons and through the diurnal cycles, just like our circadian rhythms used to do and match in this synchronicity. Coincidence is only coincidence because we've removed ourselves from the harmonic that is the symphony of life being pushed and pulled by the tides, our evolution around the sun, creating the seasons, the days, the weather events. We've just gotten so detached. The virtual has become the real. Remember the term virtual reality when the internet was coming online? Now there's no differentiation. There's no need. It's all the same. It's all the same. Yeah. But it's not all the same because you're missing the plug-in, your body, your experiences. Shelter building. People complain when we do shelter building, we divide it into three things. We divide shelter building into quick shelters, which are over the course of more than 3 or 4 days ineffective. You build them quick, and then you spend the rest of your day gathering firewood, the rest of your night keeping the fire going, the rest of the next morning going, should I move because I burned all the firewood? And so after day 3 of 3 nights of constant sleep deprivation, you lose gross motor skills and most of your judgment. Whereas a transitionary shelter, now that one top loads your time and calories. You're building a shelter for 4 to 8 hours. And the drive-through mind of the modern world with 3-second scene changes as their attention span starts to get mad. How many teams of people did it take to build your house, your modern house? How many foundation workers, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, drywall people, roofers, ductwork people? And to support it, the garbage man, the mail, the people you have to hire to redo the gutters or paint the house, or if you're not doing it yourself. Yeah? And then you're going to complain that it takes 4 to 8 hours to build a shelter for your first one, because it only gets better from there, for your first one. And then you have a mildly discomforting night because you're not used to sleeping in a mummy sleeping bag made of leaves. All right, let's break it down. You want to break it down into modern calorie expression? A top-of-the-line 4-season tent, because that's what it's going to take with the UV rays breaking down its plastic polymers and the weather extremes causing the molecules within that same plastic to get brittle over time. And the inevitable jamming of zippers or tearing of grommets or loss of tent pegs. Right? You're going to probably have that tent maybe 2 years in constant woods living, and that's if you're meticulous about its maintenance. Debris will last 4 or 5 years. And you put 4 to 8 hours into it initially, and maintenance is as simple as pulling all the debris out, getting fresh debris in every fall, and adding as you go, adding more to the outside as you go. It's funny because The maintenance is so easy that when you want to maintain it, you end up improving upon it, building an extension workroom, adding a dome-shaped thatched hut where you would come out so that you always have a warm place to sleep if you need it. But the convenience of a thatched hut allows you to sleep on a raised bed and store your pottery and maybe even work on small hides as you tan them. Certainly kneel and get your Bodro fire without being in the elements. You could even have guests, right? A debris hut requires no firewood and gives you sound rest. Do you know what a gift that is? Instead of spending the night half awake, hoping the fire doesn't consume you or die, turning from the blistered side to the frozen side towards the fire, and then having all that hours upon hours of stumbling around the woods and trying to gather large amounts of firewood while you're half tired from a sleepless night before. Debris hut, you wake up well rested and you come into the world ready to go. Right? But we're not meant to live as caddisflies in a cocoon. Instead, a debris hut is a transition into something a little bit more long-term on the same natural energy flow systems from that giant fission reactor fusing helium or hydrogen into helium, the sun, which is many more times larger than this planet. We're not going to run it out, folks. And if it does run out, we've got bigger problems. The original solar panels that we have yet to beat in efficiency, the trees and the plants, and all that feed on them, the soils that we need to maintain lest they wash into the ocean at an alarming rate. We have a stake in becoming stewards of the land because, as Grandfather Ray would say, we take care of the forest for the forest's sake so that the forest can take care of us. And that doesn't matter if it's stick-built with solar panels and radiant floor heating, or if it's a mandan or an earth lodge built mostly of gathered materials. I say mostly because we don't have the big old growth forests. We don't have the birches that you can't put your arms around. There's one in Augusta, and I don't tell anybody where it is. And I still fear for its safety. What a heartbreaker that if we found a tree big enough for our earth lodge to peel the bark, that we'd actually go through with it because they're so rare. They need to be ambassadors, if for nothing else, to remind the grandchildren of what once existed so that they have an ecological ideal to choose and to incorporate into their being. Because I can't imagine the understory of an old growth forest with mixed hardwood and softwood species and the amount of biomass that would have supported. And we know from history the incredible herds of woodland caribou, the timber wolves, the wolverine, the things that were supported in places they can no longer exist because of imbalances and lack. The lack of understory fertile grounds that fed countless understory fruit-producing plants and shrubs that moved the deer, the woodland caribou, and the moose back and forth across this area, seeding as they went, propagating the seeds of the plants they ate, much like the Sami managed the reindeer to keep the forest a carpet of berries. It's found around the world. Hawaii has the still existing fisheries carved into the coral, and all of those edible foods were brought over by boat onto this volcanic island. So as you start to plug into your modern systems, think shelter, water, fire, and food and how that expresses, but then learn those systems. Learn the systems. Do you know what would happen if your furnace went down? How to do a diagnostic test, a run through to see what the problem might be, at least narrow it down to one or two possibilities. I mean, that way, when you call the furnace person and they start to give you a story because they don't think you know, you can ask polite, targeted questions about specifics in the system to gently remind them that you do know. And they might even respect you for it and give you a deal. if you talk to them through their BS and to the human being, who after all is just doing their best as they know how to try to feed their families by ripping you off. You don't smack a blind person. You just demonstrate what being online is and gently let them know you see them. And usually people are good enough that they'll step up to that expectation. Attitude, proactive mindset, choice, awareness, shelter, water, fire, and food. So when we build our shelter, this is where your notebook comes. Remember that it must be effective, and effective is defined as addressing conduction, getting you off the ground, or the ground that you're on is heated, or there's insulation between you and the cold of the earth. Now, there's ways to cheat that. You can go below frost line, constant 50-something degrees. I can't remember what it is. But then you have moisture issues to deal with, so be mindful of that. Right? So you have conduction, convection, protecting yourself from the wind, modern Tyvek and vapor barriers that allow the moisture to get out of the house, and ventilation, and keep the heat in as much as possible. If you're going to have to ventilate because of mold issues, think about heat. It doesn't really rise, it expands. It expands away from the source of the heat toward the coldest part of the area. Well, in big terms, the core of the earth is radiating outward, as is any of the heat on the earth from our perspective rises, but it's actually heading for the coldest, darkest, deepest places in space. It's going to be sucked into the cold sinks. We can design cold sinks into our house, but that's what the basement is a cold sink. It's always damp and cool down in the basement because warm air likes to expand out and away. Those big boofy clouds that create those thunderheads, that's warm rising air taking all of its moisture. And once it hits the cold of that upper atmosphere, it condenses. And that's why those clouds look like, well, it's actually a pattern in nature called cloud pattern. Broccoli does the same thing. Different mechanics, same expression of moisture, though. So as you're building your shelter, think about how air moves through it. A tight shelter, often too tight if not ventilated properly, will have an effect where you open a door really fast and there's a little suction inside the house that can be felt, or another door closes, right? That's really a good sign that you have airtight. But airtight doesn't mean insulated enough. Airtight can still conduct through windows. What airtight does mean is you may not be getting enough air movement to be healthy in there for long periods of time, especially in winter. The sun has a low arc. Mold and fungus love damp, cool, dark. And winter provides all of that if you don't have ventilation. It's the stove and the heat that gets lost that also transports the moisture responsible for mold and bad air in homes. So we go from shelter to water. We started with water management, right? The cloud of breath that joins the giant clouds above your head in the winter is also sticking to the walls if we don't get it out of there. That sweat, not the sweat that we make that has the same salt ratio and mineral composition as the ocean, but the sweat that's on the walls of a home is a farm for mold. And black mold is serious health issues, just to let you know, if you don't already. Most folks in New England know, because it's something we have to deal with, even in our modern homes. But water is necessary. In fact, if you have the question, am I dehydrated or should I drink water? The answer is always yes. The thought means drink water. If you look at natural disasters in our modern world, especially the hurricanes, first in the South, then later on in New Jersey, New York, where it mattered because that's where the media lived, you'll notice that beyond the disaster of the mechanics of high winds and heavy rains and tide surges, immediately afterwards, because of lack of power, because of, devastation, it's water that becomes an issue, both for hydration, but also for hygiene. No one talks about hygiene as number 3 most common way we die in an off-grid situation. It's not as glamorous as hypothermia and dehydration, number 1 and 2. So hypothermia, taken care of through shelter. Dehydration, water. Hygiene, water. You don't want to poop in water when the grid is down. We're so conditioned to poop in a toilet. But a little sawdust or vegetative compost on the bottom of a bucket so that whatever you put in there doesn't stick like a sickly ceramic decoration for generations to come. And then every time you make your deposit, you add more cellulose like dead leaves or straw or even grass clippings, green manure, as long as it dampens the scent to undetectable. When that bucket gets 2/3 full, you put a lid on it and you have your bucket stored odorless, contamination proof in the designated room that you decided was far enough away from the kitchen and the sleeping quarters that no hygiene contamination could occur. You have your wash station. So, and everybody's paying rapt attention. Hey, you didn't wash your hands. Go back and wash your hands. You have your wash station as you're leaving the latrine area, whether it's in the forest or in your high rise during a 5-day blackout. You have your latrine station just as you're leaving the bathroom area. And you have another one as you enter the food prep area. We're going to create double-walled vector prevention. We don't want Giardia or worse, E. coli stuck under the fingernails of someone who wiped their butt in the sloppy fashion and didn't wash their hands to be passing out the gorp. Now everybody's a liability. The walls are painted in the most grotesque shades of brown and tan, and your heart can't beat anymore because you lost too much fluid. 1, no one's going to save you because they're all in the same boat. 2, was that your last message to the world, really? Is that how we're going to find you? It's easily preventable. So, shelter, water. Drinking water is not uncontaminated water in today's world, but it is devoid of monarins, protists, bacteria, and viruses because we boiled it and killed them. It's just not devoid of the more insidious chemical contamination, right? Biologicals are easy. Bring it to a rolling boil, 212 degrees, everything's dead. But if you boil contaminated water with heavy metals or PCBs, you are actually concentrating the toxin to drinking water ratio. So the first line of defense is have redundancy in your water systems. The toilet at the top of the tank is emergency drinking water. If you know a storm's coming, you fill as many jugs and containers as possible. Create a composting toilet system, one that is effective, odorless, hygienically sound, and sustainable. If you don't have a composting option because you live in the city, 5-gallon buckets with lids on them brought to the dump. No, but it's a survival. It's not a long-term solution. It's a solution that'll keep you from succumbing to avoidable hygiene issues that are too frequent. It's almost a given that this stuff happens once the power goes out after 4 or 5 days, that people start suffering from Giardia, any crypto or zoological sporidium that are going to get into your bloodstream and wreak havoc. But we need water, and we need a lot of it. I plan on 2 gallons per person per day. And little things like breathe through your nose, not your mouth. Drink water before you eat. Check for capillary refill by pushing on the fingernail that would light up, and then if you let go, it should turn immediately back to that pinkish. If it takes a while, that's an indicator you don't have enough fluids. Another way is the plasticity of your skin. Pinch the skin near the webbing of your thumb and forefinger and let go. It should snap right back. Again, if it doesn't, if it takes a little while for that wrinkle to iron out, you need to drink more water. Using the same hand, hang it below your hip while you're standing and look at the topography, the venation of the hand down by your thigh. As you raise it above your head, shouldn't change much. If suddenly it gets really veiny, again, you need more fluids. When's the last time you peed? Now, there's an exception to this one because medications will cause you to pee, sometimes strong smelling and dark colored and frequently. So check color, frequency, and volume against medications too. But if you have that question, you drink water. That means drink water, right? Hypovolemia is a more common way to die than drinking too much water. Way more common. People have died with full canteens because in their panicked state or their injured state, the adolescent state, I'm just going to save it till I really need it, man. And then they pass out and die because they really needed it, man, when that thought of when I really need it, man, came. You have to monitor your body and then outsmart it. We've become so heady, so logically based, we can think ourselves to death. And we often. The next, fire. In today's world, we need fire. Fire and water are so intertwined that I'll often make my fire before making my water containers out of bark. And, you can fold, during bark peeling season, you can fold white pine bark into an incredible water container that's very durable. It's not like birch bark, which is flexible, wobbly. It's more solid when it dries and will last you 2 or 3 years. Right? Make my tongs, then go down to the spring, fill up my containers, make multiple trips back to the fire as it burns to coals. And then when there's coals, instead of heating hot rocks, I'll simply put the containers right on the coals. If they're filled with water, they're not going to burn. You could do this with a Dixie cup, a paper cup filled with water, put on the coals of a campfire, will not burn. It'll bring that water to a boil. And in an emergency, this is where people are going to cringe a little bit, but you have to, through triage, you have to decide, make some hard decisions on what you're going to do to see another day. Are you going to cut the tops off of those plastic water bottles and juice containers that were thrown out of the truck on the side of that road 20 years ago and boil water knowing full well about the PFAS and the microplastics that are going to get in there? I am, because dehydration kills you in days, and microplastics just look weird to the guy in the morgue cutting you open and seeing plastic tubes in your veins. I won't be around to enjoy that. Although maybe there's some piece of me that smiles when I kind of envision it. Surprise! But water is life, as accurately expressed in some recent events. It's also considered the Earth's blood by the lineage that has mainlined the deep connection to our ancestral unity. In this case, it was, for me, the Northern Lipan Apache, supported by so many other people who walked strong in their tribal tradition, but loved enough to breach the void of grief that tends to separate us from our land. In their lifetime, the way it was expressed almost uniformly was that the children weren't interested in keeping the old ways alive, and they just wanted to keep the old ways alive before they went with them. And I was hungry for it. I have always been hungry for it. I think everybody has it. They just don't know how to direct it. I know a lot of people who are fellow Marines who joined the Marine Corps because they loved being outside. They loved the woods. They wanted to further the craft. And so do I. I can't wait. I know what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be really good in the woods. I want to make the woods so it's home. And then I want to share how to make that a known, recognized, honorable thing that has some pertinence in our modern world. So here I am, working it. Problem is, I don't know that I want to grow up, so I'm not sure I'll ever get there. Shelter, water, fire. Fire is the fuel that keeps us going. It illuminates the darkness. It keeps us warm. It cooks our food. It boils our water. Fire hardens our tools, but it also shapes them through steam bending and boiling to make snowshoe frames, drum hoops, recurve our bows, straighten our arrows. And on a more esoteric level, I suppose, fire is what burns in your heart, what gets you out of bed, excited to engage in the world, what causes you to collapse at the end of the day with peace in your heart and a smile on your face, totally exhausted. When you're little, surfing's enough, skiing's enough, climbing trees is enough, but then as you mature, how do I share this feeling of joy, of connection, of nourishment? How can my being in this benefit the people I love? What do you want to be when you grow up? Fire, right? If you don't watch fire, it'll either go out on you or it'll expand uncontrollably. There's a lesson in that. You can be selfish with your vision. It can consume you. Or if you neglect it, it'll shrivel up and die. The next one, food. The never-ending quest for calories. And when people come to terms with the fact they have to kill every day in order to live, the calories are the currency of the natural world and its systems, time and calories. Calories are a measurement of heat, right? We burn calories. We burn life. We consume life like a furnace. And then our actions, measured in calories, are related to how we feel about the calories we consume. On some level, if you don't respect the gift, you have no compulsion to live a life deserving of it. When you see the life leave a rabbit or a chicken or a deer at your hand, then you have to process the meat. It changes you. It makes you want to live a life deserving of it. If you don't have ownership of that process because, you throw paper at somebody or a plastic card and then slabs of lifeless form show up either in stalks of celery or in slabs of meat. I mean, we're the only species who puts value on it. There's a hierarchy of importance based on how cute their eyes are. But I would argue grasses are more valuable than bears because grasses feed bears and everybody in between. Grasses hold the soil, they make the soil, they breathe our air and clean it. They are a source of gathering water, thatching homes. But they don't have cute eyes, so they're easier to kill. And that detachment gets us into trouble. If you don't believe it, look at all of the oral traditions from around the world. There are stories in each one warning us of what happens if we lose our thankfulness for the gift of life. The buffalo will leave. The sun will no longer come up over the horizon because we don't thank it enough or sing songs of welcoming or farewell as it goes down. That's the Wampanoag story of grandfather's son, Paushat, and grandfather's son. And Paushat Kisakwan is the name for the son, I believe. And it was, I think Gluskabe has a similar story in the Penobscot, but everywhere, lack of thankfulness equals disaster. And what that does is remind us to reclaim our emotional intelligence. I don't want to sing Kumbaya around the fire, brother. Well, that's because you're emotionally slowed in growth. There used to be a word for that, but they made it politically incorrect because it was what was being generated in the institution. Anyway, we can't use the word retarded if that's what we're making. So get your senses out of the hospital bed. Become more aware. It's going to hurt a little bit. Choose to see through it. The hurt teaches you something. Why is this here? What is this teaching me? What am I going to do about it? Remember what is critical to keep you alive, not only just eking by, but well, grounded, healthy, flourishing. Shelter is first on that list. Secure your shelter. It might mean bring an extra pair of socks to work in case you step in a puddle and get your feet wet. Or it might mean we need to remove this wall and put in a picture window and some radiant heat absorption black tiles on the opposite wall. Or bags of leaves around the foundation. We rake them up anyway. Free insulation, less oil burned, money saved. Fire. It's more than turning off the lights when you leave a room. Maybe get a motion detector to turn off the lights and turn them back on when you enter the room. But fire is something that if we neglect it, it can go out. And if we're careless with it, it can consume us. And that means financially as well as comfort-wise, safety-wise. Teach your children the safety of how to light a match responsibly, but only after they burn themselves. And you know they're going to burn themselves, so just set it up so it's safe. When there's a wood stove and you know the kids are going to be around, have the ice packs at the ready and then say, don't touch this, it's hot. And then when you go get the ice packs, by the time you come back, they're going to be needed. Now they know what hot is, and they won't find themselves under a bed lighting a match and in the obituary columns the next morning. Kids want to take risks. There are actual risks and there are perceived risks, and the adults who raise kids should know the difference and facilitate accordingly so that the kid goes on a journey that respects fire safety. Christmas trees. Good God. Next to couches. Live Christmas trees next to couches, wrapped in electricity, with glass bulbs. And nobody's home. They all went shopping, except the dog, who will be found as a charred, well-done crisp in the rubble. If you're lucky, that's all will be found. Fire has lost its power in our modern world because we think we control it till it's open to just a little bit of chaos is all it needs to thrive. Water. Do you know your water systems? Do you know where the water comes into your house? Do you have a specialized wrench to access those little squares that exist on the sides of every building to get emergency water if things go south? Do you have enough proactive mindset to fill the bathtub and all of the containers you have with water before the hurricane? Don't let your pipes freeze. Thousands of dollars of repairs after water damage destroys whatever's beneath those pipes. Some houses have been totaled because of it. Don't let the sewage back up into your drinking water. And if you know what's going to happen, be prepared beforehand. And think, you're not the only one who's going out to buy all that water. And in concentrations of panicked people compressed towards one prey animal, you get, like in nature, violence, explosive violence, often leading to death. Lions will kill each other for the same hunting grounds, as will bear, as will coyotes, as will wolves, as will foxes. We're no different. So avoid being in situations where water is being fought over by having redundancy in systems and being proactive about taking care of your drinking water, which goes back to fire too, by the way. And then food. I cook, and I'm not telling you what to do, but because my brain is so scattered, I cook and prepare a week to 10 days ahead of time. And I freeze, the meals ahead. And as I eat one, I take one out of the freezer and put it in the refrigerator with the other 3 that are waiting for me. I try to have enough meals in the fridge ready to go for one whole day plus one meal. And then as I take one out, I rotate the fridge stock and put the frozen one in the back, and it works its way up. And by the time it does, it's thawed. But I need that level of investment to stay on a healthy diet, because as soon as chocolate cake or pizza comes by, if I have the slightest bit of hunger, well, the industry calls it craveability. We call it addiction. Simple carbs, right? They've hacked into our primal quest for calories, and now we are the most overweight, undernourished species on the planet. Touché. Craveability. There's an industry term. So we're reclaiming our self-reliance, our personal sovereignty through owning and securing with ease and predictability. It's not going to be easy work. It's going to be an investment of time and practice. Our capability of providing effective and comfortable shelter, reliable, redundant, and maintainable water and fire as they relate to each other, so that we can go through the cycles of the seasons, preparing to get through the harshest times, winter usually, but also drought. With regard to food, calories, we're not just hunting and gathering and processing. We're drying and canning, making fruit leathers, dehydrating, boiling, tincturing, salving for our food, medicine, and fiber, all of it. And it's fun. I mean, it's really rewarding. It's exhausting. And sometimes it gets tedious. Rice camp is fun for the first 3 days, but if you're making a winter's worth of rice that you've just gathered, the parching process, the treading process, you need a community. You need at least 5 to 6 people to pull it off. And when you're done, you have enough nutrient-dense, rich-tasting, wild-gathered food. There was a calorie and time investment, but you got rid of the middleman, and it tastes so much better. And it's so much better for you. You're not working for a living, you're living. So in some part of the process of reclaiming your personal sovereignty, you find timelessness, joy, a deep connection to nature, a knowledge of self, and meaningful relationships, not just with the landscape, but with the people around you who work for that common goal. There you go, folks. I hope you wrote some things down, because keeping it on an audio, while great for storytelling, if you really want to hardwire it into yourself, you tell the story through a kinetic process, a visual process, where you feel the words leaving your body, you see them being written. And the journal is our elders. We don't have the campfire. Grandma and grandpa aren't as accessible as they used to be. So the elder is your 80-year-old wisdom keeper self. You're journaling your voyage and learning as you go. And when you write it down, whatever you write down becomes part of you more deeply. It becomes long-term memory as you relive the story. I look forward to hearing how it turns out. See you on the trail. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Dear Grandchildren, A Tracker's Tale. If today's journey resonates with you, I invite you to share it with others who long for a deeper connection to nature and themselves. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts for bonus episodes, exclusive question and answer sessions, and more tales from the wild. Your support through subscriptions, feedback, or simply spreading word keeps this flame of ancestral wisdom alive. And if you're ready to take the next step, contact the Central School at primitiveskills.com or email staff@primitiveskills.com to learn all about our workshops, experiences, lectures, expeditions, and how we can bring these teachings directly to you. Until next time, may your trails be clear and your heart full. Keep exploring and keep the fire burning.